Stefan Verstappen, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hi, Richard. Thank you very much for having me back on.
My pleasure.
And congratulations on your news show. Awesome.
Thank you. So people might be listening to this and saying, well, the war in Ukraine, that's way over there. Inflation, okay, we had inflation in the 80s. I remember that. We got through it. Why are we panicking? Why are we talking about preparing, emergency food stores? And, this is just panic. Why do we need to prepare, Stefan?
Well, we always needed to prepare. Going way back to my days as a Cub Scout, it was in the Cub Scout guide that people should have an emergency kit in their house. And when I worked for St. John Ambulance and the Red Cross, they all recommend that you have an emergency kit. Minimum 3 days worth of food. But now the U.S. disaster preparedness sites are recommending that you have 3 months worth of food. So they've upped it quite a bit. But, listen, life is a crapshoot. Bad things can happen at any time and for many different reasons. There's all kinds of reasons that could affect your daily life and cause total disruption of, power, hydro, internet, phones. The stores won't open. They can't open if there's no power. And you need to be on your own and be able to look after your own needs for a minimum of 3 days and going on to 3 months and even going on to 3 years. So, being prepared is not some kind of paranoid reaction. That's the motto of the Boy Scouts. Be prepared. Especially if you have a family and you have kids in the house. You got to make sure that you can look after their needs for a period of time if something happens. But now we are talking about, well, listen, we are in a serious situation, folks. What is going on right now, I haven't seen anything like this in my life. I have been warning people about it for at least 20 years. I knew this was coming. I tried to get out of Canada last month. I did my best to escape. Unfortunately, I failed. So I'm still here, but I knew this was coming. What happens when you are under a communist tyranny, and if anybody doesn't believe we are in a communist tyranny right now, right here in Canada, just look back at the actions of Adolf Castro. I mean, Justin Castro. I mean, Justin Trudeau. Look at what happened there. You think we live in a democracy? We haven't lived in a democracy in many decades, okay? And, I told people, okay, it's fine, demonstrate, protest, sign petitions, vote, but none of that is going to make a goddamn bit of difference.
Okay, you have to be careful of the language.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
None of this is going to make any difference because the powers that be, they're tyrants. They always are tyrants. The enemy of mankind is its own government. And now we've seen how quickly, how ruthlessly that government can turn into a dictatorship. When Justin Trudeau declared state of emergency, which is in effect martial law, because of a peaceful protest. So look, the gloves came off. I think he showed his true colors in the last couple of months. But this is just the beginning. Here's the danger. Whenever communists take over, and that's what we have now, it's a communist takeover. Never mind, it's the liberals. Liberal is a front behind which communism works. It's just a false flag. It's a false face. Whenever communists take over a country, one of their primary weapons is mass starvation. So today's tip is going to be stockpile some food. There's a lot of things you need to do to get ready for what's coming.
All right, Stefan, we'll take a time out. We'll come back, and we'll get into that. Stefan Verstappen, survival emergency preparedness expert, martial artist, author of The Complete Guide to Forming Communities. And the website is chinastrategies.com. We'll tell you about his online course as well. When we come back, how to stockpile food right here on the Richard Syrett Show, back in 3 minutes. Stockpiling food is always a good idea. How do we begin?
Well, you're right, Richard. This is not a political thing. It's the people that run the world. And whether you call them liberals or Democrats or Republicans, all of that is just minor differences. But they intend to, starve us. I don't know what else to say. And intentionally, but they're going to do it through a number of different ways. The first way they're going to do it is through the supply chain interruptions. Look what's going on already. We had the Freedom Convoy. Now, what were they protesting? They were protesting the fact that all these truck drivers need to show a vaccine passport before they can go over the border between Canada and the U.S. Now, as you know, we import most of our food from the U.S. I mean, we have our own farmers and our own produce and things like that, but a lot of our food comes from overseas, and they're brought here by trucks. And these truckers are not working because they don't want to take the vaccine in order to cross the border. So we already have a disruption in the supply chain right there. Plus, there are disruptions for the farmers and their supply chain. We know now with the war with, I don't know, we call it a war, the staged op, whatever it is that's going on in Russia and the Ukraine. But, Russia is one of the biggest exporters of fertilizer to the world. And farmers, and we're just about up to planting season now, won't be able to get the fertilizer they need to grow the crops. And so the farmers are being hamstrung and they're being hindered in producing as much as they can. So
the price of diesel is through the roof.
Plus, the next thing, of course, is there we go. This is the price of gas. It's insanity, especially when you consider that Canada could be completely self-reliant on its own petroleum. I was up in Fort McMurray where we have the tar sands project, or they like to call it the oil sands now. But we're completely self-sufficient. We don't need to import oil or gas or diesel. We can do it all ourselves. We have enough here in Canada to supply all our needs, plus all the needs of the United States. So, but this is done on purpose. This is all part of a plan. The high oil prices, the interference with the farmers' ability to grow crops, and the high gas prices. All of this is going to affect the ability of grocery stores to get the shipments they need to feed us. The other thing we need to take into consideration is the hyperinflation. I was talking, thanks to Justin Trudeau and his confiscation of bank accounts, I was talking to my gold and bullion dealer, and they're out of inventory. I said, why? Is it because everybody's taking their money out of the bank and buying gold and silver? And he said, absolutely. They're busy off their butts because nobody trusts the banks anymore. So we are going to be experience hyperinflation. So even if the food is on the shelves, you might not be able to afford it.
All right, so we've just got about 4 minutes here, 4.5 minutes. Let's start to discuss, and we'll revisit this topic, obviously. How do you begin to put together an emergency food store? How much, and how do you go about it? Because, there are so many emergency food storage companies now online, for My Patriot Supply, and that sell freeze-dried food that can last up to 25 years and so forth. How do we begin?
Well, you begin by, listen, you got to go up to the grocery store, and you got to start right now. 5 years ago, I told people every time you went to the store, buy 2 extra cans of, pork and beans or Spam or tuna. You do that every week, a couple of cans here, a couple of cans there. Well, after 6 months, you got a lot of food. It's getting too late for that because the price of food is going through the roof. So buy what you can while you can now, because in 2 weeks, who knows if you can even afford it. So my recommendation, and that's why we're going to start with that, because it's the most serious danger that we face right now is either the lack of food or the high cost of food that you can't even afford to buy it anymore. So while we still have food in the grocery stores, and if you have any spare money in the bank, spend it on getting as much food as you can. I don't like the 25-year freeze-dried nonsense. I find it expensive, and most of it is like Kraft dinner or something like that. Anyways, you can buy all the food you need from the local grocery store. You can buy the freeze-dried stuff. But I would recommend buying canned food. Two things: staples, flour, spaghetti, rice, mashed, powdered potatoes, powdered milk. Those are your staples. They last forever and they fill your stomach. Then, to make that stuff taste good, then buy canned food. But canned food that contains protein. Protein is always the hardest thing to find during a crisis. So I would get canned tuna, canned ham, canned chicken. I got meatballs and gravy in a can. I've got, listen, I know nobody likes it, but Spam, that's fine too. You know, at least it's grease and fat and protein. I get canned gravy. I get gravy mix and spices, salt, sugar. And then what you can do is you can supplement your rice, your beans, your spaghetti. You can supplement it and make it taste good by opening up a can of beef stew, a can of gravy, a can of meatballs, a can of chicken, and mix that all together.
And how much should you have? I mean, people, if you live in an apartment, for example, you can't hoard 6 months worth of food, or can
Sure
you?
you can.
You can, okay.
Oh yeah, it doesn't take up that much space. I put my food supplies in those vinyl storage containers. You know, the one with the
Yes.
lid and they got a handle. Each one of those holds like 3 weeks to a month's supply of food for me, and they're stackable, one on top of the other. So I can stack 6 of those things, one on top of the other, in the back of my bedroom closet. All right, so that's 6 months worth of food right there.
What about fresh water?
Well, that's a whole nother topic. Maybe we should wait till
Yeah,
next
we will.
week.
We'll do that. We'll save fresh water for another time. Stefan Verstappen, survival emergency preparedness expert, and tell us about the online course at chinastrategies.com.
Okay, your second strategy for surviving all this. First, you got to get prepped, get the food, and in the following weeks when I come on, we'll talk about things like radios and water and security devices. But after you've prepped, after you've got your food and your medicine, set aside, the next thing we need to do is we need to work together in autonomous communities. We got to help each other, folks. That's the only way we're going to survive, and that's the only way we can fight the coming tyranny, is if we work together and cooperate. That's how our ancestors survived.
All right. We'll talk about the online course next week as well. chinastrategies.com, the website, and the book is The Complete Guide to Forming Communities. We'll also next week talk about the library at chinastrategies.com, where you can download over 180 survival books to teach you how to survive any emergency or disaster. As I say, not trying to scaremonger, but it's always about hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. Stefan, thanks so much, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Richard. You have a good week.
You too. Stefan Verstappen.